Hey everyone! In this video, we're going to do a quick but powerful tour of Postman. What it is, why developers and testers use it, and how to get started with the most important basics like workspace creation, collections, and the main interface. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear idea of how Postman works and where to begin. Postman is one of the most widely used tools for API testing and API development. At first glance, many people think it is only for sending requests and checking responses, but it actually does much more than that. You can use it to organize requests, manage workspaces, create collections, share work with your team, and keep your API testing workflow neat and professional. If you are just starting out, don't worry, Postman is designed in a way that makes it easy to explore step by step. So in this video, I'll keep it simple and practical, so you can follow along even if this is your very first time opening the tool. Once you install and open the latest version of Postman, this is the screen you'll usually see. The layout is built around your workspace, and the UI gives you quick access to the most important areas like collections, environments, specs, and flows on the left side. At the top, you'll notice the workspace name, search option, environment selector, and collaboration controls. The center area shows the active workspace overview, while the left panel is where you'll spend a lot of your time organizing your API work. So before we even send a request, the first thing to understand is the structure of Postman. Once that structure is clear, everything else becomes much easier. Let's start with the workspace. A workspace is basically your main working area in Postman, where your requests, collections, and related assets are stored and managed. To create a workspace, you can go to the Create option and set up a new one for your project. Enter a workspace name, select the workspace type. For most projects, an internal workspace is a good choice, allowing you to securely share APIs with your team. You can also choose public if you want to make your APIs accessible to everyone. Then, choose who can access the workspace. Now decide how you'd like to set up the workspace. Select blank workspace to start from scratch, or connect an existing project by choosing from a Git repository. If you want some help getting started, you can also use Postman AI to generate collections, API specifications, and environments. Once everything is configured, click Create Workspace. Think of your workspace as the central hub for your API project. Your collections, environments, requests, and other resources will all be organized here, making it easy to manage and collaborate as your project grows. Now that our workspace is ready, let's create our first collection. On the left side of the screen, you'll find the Collections panel. Click the Create button to create a new collection. Postman instantly creates a new collection and opens its overview page. At the same time, you'll see the collection appear in the Collections panel on the left with the default name New Collection. The first thing you should do is rename it to something meaningful, such as authentication, user management, or orders, so it's easy to identify as your project grows. Think of a collection as a folder that groups related API requests. For example, you might keep all login and registration APIs in an authentication collection, user-related APIs in a users collection, and product or order APIs in separate collections. This keeps your project organized, easy to navigate, and much easier to maintain. As you can see, this collection is currently empty. Postman provides two quick options to help you get started. Click Add Request to create your first API request. Each request represents a single API endpoint, such as a login request, a Get Users request, or a Create Order request. As your project grows, you can use Add Folder to organize related requests within the collection. For example, you might create folders named Authentication, Users, Products, and Orders, then place the corresponding API requests inside each one. This keeps your collection clean, organized, and easier to manage. Across the top of the collection, you'll notice several tabs. Each one helps you manage different aspects of your API testing workflow. The Overview tab is the home page of the collection. Here you can add a description explaining the purpose of the collection, making it easier for you and your teammates to understand what it contains. The Authorization tab lets you configure authentication for every request in the collection. Instead of adding authentication separately to each request, you can define it once here, and all requests inside the collection will automatically inherit those settings. Postman supports several authentication methods, including basic auth, bearer token, JWT bearer, OAuth 2.0, and API key authentication. For example, if your APIs use a bearer token, you can configure it once at the collection level, and every request in that collection can use it automatically. This saves time and keeps your authentication consistent. The Scripts tab is where you can write JavaScript that runs automatically during request execution. You can create two types of scripts. Pre-request scripts run before a request is sent. They're commonly used to generate dynamic values, set variables, or prepare authentication tokens. Post-response scripts run after the response is received. They're typically used to validate responses, verify status codes, check return data, or save values that can be reused in later requests. Since these scripts are created at the collection level, every request inside the collection can inherit them, helping you avoid repeating the same logic multiple times. The Variables tab lets you store reusable values that can be shared across the entire collection. Instead of entering the same information in every request, you can define variables such as the base URL, API version, authentication token, or user ID. If any of these values change, you only need to update them once, and every request that references those variables will automatically use the updated value. Finally, the Runs tab lets you execute an entire collection or selected folders in a single run. After execution, Postman provides a detailed summary showing the number of passed and failed tests, response times, execution duration, and other useful statistics. This makes it especially valuable for regression testing, automated validation, and verifying complete API workflows. As your project grows, you can continue adding requests, organizing them into folders, and managing everything from this collection. Collections provide a structured way to organize, reuse, and execute API tests, making them the foundation of an efficient Postman workflow. Now let's learn about environments in Postman. An environment is a collection of variables that store values you can reuse across your API requests. Instead of entering the same information repeatedly, you define it once and reference it whenever you need it. For example, you might store your base URL, API version, authentication token, or user ID as environment variables. If any of these values change, you only need to update them in one place instead of editing every request individually. This becomes especially useful when you're working with multiple environments, such as development, testing, and production. Each environment can have its own set of variable values while using the same API requests. To create a new environment, go to the Environments section in the left sidebar and click the Create button. Postman immediately creates a new environment and opens it in a new tab. By default, it's named New Environment. The first step is to rename it to something meaningful, such as development, QA, staging, or production, depending on the environment you'll be working with. Below the name, you'll find a table with two columns, variable and value. In the variable column, enter the name of the variable, such as base URL or token. In the value column, enter the corresponding value. For example, the base URL variable might contain the URL of your API server, while the token variable could store your authentication token. Once you've added your variables and saved the environment, you can reference them in your requests using double curly braces. For example, instead of typing the full API URL every time, you can use base URL, and Postman will automatically replace it with the value stored in the selected environment. At the top right corner of the Postman window, you'll notice the environment selector. This drop-down lets you switch between different environments at any time. For example, you can create separate environments for development, QA, and production. When you select a different environment, Postman automatically uses the variable values stored in that environment without requiring you to modify your requests. This makes your API testing more flexible, reduces duplication, and minimizes the risk of using the wrong URLs or credentials. Environments are one of Postman's most powerful productivity features because they allow the same collection and requests to be reused across multiple systems simply by switching the active environment. Next, let's look at the Specs section. The Specs feature is used to design, import, and manage API specifications. An API specification is a document that describes how an API works, including its endpoints, request methods, parameters, headers, request bodies, and expected responses. When you click Create, Postman lets you create or import specifications in popular formats such as OpenAPI, Async API, GraphQL, protocol buffers, and Smithy. This feature is especially useful when you're designing an API before development begins or when documenting an existing API. If you're only testing existing APIs, you may not use specs very often. However, it's an essential feature for API design, documentation, and contract-first development. Now let's explore the Flows section. Flows is Postman's visual workflow builder. Instead of writing JavaScript code, you can create API workflows by dragging and connecting blocks together. You can send requests, pass data between requests, add conditions, loops, delays, and perform data transformations using a simple visual interface. Flows are useful for automating multi-step API processes such as logging in, retrieving an authentication token, creating a user, and then using that user's ID in another request, all without writing complex scripts. While advanced testers often use collections and JavaScript for automation, Flows provides an intuitive way to build, test, and demonstrate API workflows visually. Now you've seen the essential parts of the Postman interface and learned how to create a workspace, organize your requests using collections, configure environments, and explore additional features like specs and flows. Don't worry if everything doesn't make perfect sense yet. As we start building real API requests, you'll naturally become familiar with these features and understand when to use each one. That wraps up our introduction to Postman. In the next video, we'll create our very first API request and learn how to send requests, inspect responses, and begin testing APIs step by step.